Hello everyone. Welcome to the online study jam on Google Assistant. Here with you today is Sachin Kumar. I'm a Google developer expert. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Qwiklabs, and I also head the Google developer groups in Doha. So if you'd like to follow me on my social media channels, this is my Twitter handle, and you can find a lot of tutorials and blogs on my website, which is techwithsuch.com. So today for the agenda, we'll have a 30 minutes presentation on how to build conversational experiences. And I would like to kind of give uh, a flavor of what Google Assistant is and how it can be helpful and why you as developers who have joined in today would find it interesting to build uh, or extend your applications on top of the platform. And from there, we will start with an introduction to Qwiklabs. So Qwiklabs is a training tool that we'll be using today to kind of do all of our lab sessions. So hopefully we cover at least 2 to 3 labs today. So uh, let's hope for the best. So to begin, let's start with how to build conversational experiences. So what is Google Assistant? So to kind of put it in a small, um, to keep it brief, a Google Assistant is your own personal assistant from Google to get things done. I mean, it is uh, quite a experience when you start using it. So for those who are not aware of what a Google Assistant is, you can go to assistant.google.com and you can download the application both for Android and iPhones. And for those who already have it, this is also an opportunity for you to learn how to build your own actions or applications on top of it. So at Google, Google believes the future is AI first. So it's been investing heavily in 3 areas. That is machine learning, speech recognition, and language understanding. So when these three things come together in the Google Assistant, that's what makes it magical. So it allows you to have a conversation with Google that helps you get things done easily. So just to kind of give you guys a flavor of what a Google Assistant would sound like, I have a smart display with me right now. Let me turn off the mic.
The mic's back on.
And hopefully you guys hear this. So I can say something like, hey Google, what's the weather?
Currently in Doha, it's 39 and mostly sunny.
So as you can see, it's
Today, it'll be
pretty hot
cloudy
here.
with a forecast high of 41 and a low of 32.
Hey Google, what's on my schedule today?
There's one entry for today. At 5 p.m., you have English Google Assistant Online Study Jam.
Cool. So let me mute the mic so
The
that we
mic's
don't
off.
trigger that. So that was actually a small demo of the Google Assistant. As you can see, it gave me the weather information quickly, as well as it kind of knew that based on my voice and the account that's linked to the device, it knows what's in my calendar as well. So these kind of experiences or conversational experiences that as a user that when you have, it kinds of change the overall paradigm of how you interact with devices throughout your life. I mean, on your in your daily life. So let's say we've been used to using laptops, desktops, lately mobile devices. So everything that you kind of interact with with the world is basically with your mobile device and also through applications. So with Google Assistant and other voice assistants, it kinds of takes it to the next level because you're having a conversation with the assistant, and the assistant gets the things done for you. So, as a developer, what are the three major areas that you need to keep in mind, right? So, one is the Google Assistant. So, the Google Assistant is the conversation between the user and Google. So, they can get things done by talking to the assistant. There are many things the assistant can do just by asking the assistant directly. So, I gave you like few instances. I can also play music. I can control my lights at home. I can even control my curtains. I'll kind of give you some demos of that as well. And at the same time, there are a lot of devices with the Google Assistant built in. So as we mentioned before, we have devices like the Google Home uh, speakers, we have Android phones, iPhones, cars, headphones, Chromebooks, Android TVs, and also cars, right? And this list keeps growing. It's an expanding, continuously expanding audience. And one last thing that I left out is Actions on Google. So Actions on Google is the platform where developers can extend the assistant to build your own applications. So if you already have an app, or if you want to build an app or action in this case that you want to build on top of Google Assistant, Actions on Google is the platform to do that. So as I mentioned earlier, the actions are available across various devices, right? So these are a few examples, but again, the list keeps expanding day by day. And as a developer, you also have a developer as well as a user, you have an array of languages that you can support across multiple countries, right? So to kind of sum it up, the Google Assistant is available in 1 billion plus devices across phones, smartwatches, cars, smart displays, and more. It has support for more than 30 languages and across 80 countries. And 30,000 connected devices from 3,500 brands globally. So why is all this kind of important for you as a developer? Is mainly because of the reach, right? Anything that you build for the Google Assistant is easily accessible across all those 1 billion plus devices. So that's a huge thing for you as a developer. So moving on. So we talked about what is a Google Assistant. So it's your own personal assistant from Google. It can get things done for you easily just by having a normal conversation. And then we talked about why, as a developer, you would want to build one, right? So we covered all of these areas. But let's see how we can build one. So what are the tools that's required for you as a developer to build your own actions or applications on Google? So the first tool is, or the platform, I would say, is Actions on Google. So Actions on Google is a developer platform that lets you create software to extend the functionality of your Google Assistant. So anything that you see, let's say I can give you another demo. So let's see if I can get this on.
The mic's back on.
Hey Google, talk to Headspace.
Okay, getting Headspace. Welcome back to Headspace. You can do today's meditation, a sleep exercise, or unlock more meditations. Which would you like?
Cancel. So as you just heard, I said talk to Headspace. So Headspace is an application or an action that's built on Actions on Google platform. So once that is done, once your action is done, you can submit it to Google, and then once your application is verified, it's available across all those 1 billion plus devices, right? So Actions on Google, a platform where you create actions or applications for the Google Assistant. Now, what's Dialog Flow? So Dialog Flow is again a beautiful platform where you can build natural conversational experiences. So some of the things that you would notice over this entire course is the fact that the moment you start talking to the assistant, each one would talk in their own way. I mean, my accent might be different, the way I'm communicating with Google Assistant might be different. At the same time, it's not necessary just like traditional programming where you just say uh, a specific command or users click on a specific user interface. You don't require all that. Here, we are just having a conversation, and the ability for your conversation to kind of understand the context of what exactly the user is talking about, that's where Dialogflow comes in. So it's a platform where you can build natural conversational experiences, both for voice and text. For example, you can once you build it on Dialogflow, you can create a chatbot, the same application that you have built on Dialogflow or agent in this case. So the same agent can be extended as a chatbot. It can be extended as a Google Assistant application or action. It can even be ported to other platforms like Alexa, Facebook Messenger, Skype, and so on. So today we'll get a flavor of what Dialogflow is through our Qwiklabs. So I did want to kind of give you all a flavor of what the next generation of Google Assistant would look like. So this was announced in Google I/O recently, and I find this pretty compelling, and I will also tell you how they got this done. So this is going to be available in starting from the next Pixel 4, and hopefully from there all the other devices. Reply to Justin, had a great time with my family and it was so beautiful. Show me my pictures from Yellowstone. The ones with animals. Send it to Justin. Reply, and we even saw bison. When is my flight? Reply, I should get in around 1 p.m. So as you can see how quickly the assistant was behaving, it was able to understand even the context of the previous conversation, and all of that done in lightning fast. So how was this done? So during Google I/O, Sundar Pichai came out and he said this was a highlight, right? This was like a milestone that for Google, because what was actually, let's say, 100 GB of models running in the cloud to achieve what the current Google Assistant is doing, they kind of compressed the entire thing, brought it down to a level where it's less than half a gigabyte, which is running locally on your phone. That means the AI that powers the assistant can now run locally on your phone. You don't need to have like a cloud connectivity to get all the conversations happening. So I found this really interesting and I hope you guys are excited for this as well. And this is a game changer. And there's more. So we are talking about driving mode where again from the moment you get into your car, the Google Assistant has other features where it's voice forward dashboard. You can have all the navigation, messaging, calling, and all media done through the assistant. Another thing is for people who are used to using the Google Assistant, one of the things that uh, is the most used thing is setting a timer or an alarm. So right now, if I say, Hey Google, set a timer for 10 seconds.
All right, 10 seconds. And that's starting now.
So what happens is every time you say something, you have to say the trigger word, hey Google. But in this case, you can see that I can just say stop.
Sorry, I'm not sure how to help with that.
Stop. So that's an added feature which was actually very helpful to a lot of people because when the alarm goes off, you don't have to say, um, the hey G stop. You just have to say stop. Okay. And the reason for some of the future slides where I'll be saying hey G is just so that I don't accidentally trigger uh, the voice assistant here. So they also showcase duplex on the web where the assistant kind of automatically fills the web forms for you. And a more personal assistant that is based on your preference, your contextual cues, time of the day, step-by-step experience for how to questions. So to kind of also give you an idea, I at in my home, I've not used a remote for the past probably couple of years. So everything is voice enabled right from my lights to my, the front door has smart locks. My TV is again voice based. So everything is being as controlled using the Google Assistant. So I'll give you a short demo or video clip of how that's done as well. So now that we have seen how the next generation of Google Assistant would look like and some of those features, and we also have a pretty good idea by now what all the Google Assistant can do, right? And its capabilities. And we are just scratching the surface at this point. There's a lot more that the assistant can do, and you can have ask any kind of conversations or questions to it, and it would be smart enough for you to answer. So moving from there, let's talk about how we would like to make use of this, right? So when you're building the applications, for example, in my previous example where I said, hey G, talk to Headspace. Headspace is the application or action that's built for the Google Assistant. So in that case, it's not directly handled by Google Assistant. Google understands that, this is an action that the user is asking for. So let me connect to that specific action so that the user can interact with that specific action or application directly. So some of the ways that the user triggers it or invocates it is using these commands. So let's say tomorrow if you build your own application, you would basically build it and then once you test everything, make sure that your conversation design is all proper. Before submitting, you would choose an invocation name. So that invocation name can be hey G, talk to your application name or talk to Mr. X, whatever the application name or action name that you would like to define. That's how it would be triggered. So the moment somebody says, hey G, talk to application name or get application name or even say, hey Google, connect me with a specific action name, it would automatically understand that, okay, the user is requesting for me to connect to that specific action. And if that's available, let me connect it to that. And then I will just be a handler in between, making sure that the conversation that's coming from the user is passed and handed over to that specific application or action. So now that we are diving deep into conversations or actions, let's hear an example.
Okay, Google, what's the temperature like at Mount Everest? Okay, Google, what's the temperature like at Mount Everest?
The temperature there is The mic's off.
Ooh, better pack a jacket. Oh, hi, I'm Wayne Pekarski, and today I'm going to talk about the Google Assistant and how you can develop your own actions to be a part of this new ecosystem. At Google, we've been providing assistance to users for years across many of our products, but we think there's much more we can do to help people get things done right when they need it in a conversational way. And that's why we're building the Google Assistant. The Google Assistant can help users get things done throughout their day, whether they're at home or on the go. And it powers devices like, for example, the Google Home, a voice-activated speaker. To better serve user requests, the Google Assistant needs to work well with an ecosystem of everyone's favorite services. Actions on Google allows you as a developer to integrate your services with the Google Assistant. The user is talking to
So let's forward to the part where he's actually having the conversation.
Okay, Google, let me talk to Personal Chef.
Sure, here's Personal Chef. Hi, I'm your personal chef. What are you in the mood for?
Well, it's kind of cold outside, so I'd like something to warm me up, like a hot soup, and I want it fast.
All right, what protein would you like to use?
I have some chicken and also some canned tomatoes.
Okay, well, I think you should try the chicken tomato soup recipe I found on example.com.
Sounds good to me.
So if you actually hear the entire conversation, right? So it's using the conversation API and the actions SDK. So as a user, you actually give a voice input. The Google Assistant would automatically handle the speech to text conversion over there. The natural understanding is handled, everything is handled by the Google Assistant in between. And then it converts that into um, a text, and that's then passed on to your action using the conversation API request. Your action understands what this user is talking about, and then the response is handed back to the Google Assistant, and then the Google Assistant converts that text into audio back to the user. So that's the traditional workflow. So this is the entire workflow as such from a high level point of view. So moving on, so let's take it a step further and see every step that it goes through. So you're the user over here. So as per the example, he said, okay, G, talk to personal chef. It goes in, it goes to your Google Assistant where the speech to text conversion happens, the natural language processing happens, and then from there, it would invoke the personal chef action. So Google Assistant would understand that this person is looking for personal chef, right? So let me check if personal chef is approved and available in the directory. If so, it will, once it finds that personal chef is available, let me connect this user to that specific action. So here is where these are the two areas where your application layer uh, would basically fall. So once your action identifies, it would send a response back, right, in the form of a JSON response. Google Assistant passes that, and then it would say, what are you in the mood for? So the speaker would read this out back to the user. The user would then again have a conversation. Well, it's kind of cold outside, so I'd like to have X, Y, and Z. The speech to text conversion happens. It passes the query again and generates the response, text to speech, and then the next query, right? So if you actually kind of notice this, the user can say any kind of conversation to the user. So how would one identify, or how would your application identify that how to handle each of these questions? So we'll have a look at it. So in this case, the demo conversation was actually quite complex. Our user said cold, warm, and hot all in the same sentence. Yet the app managed to capture the correct one. So could you try, like, just imagine the whole idea of trying to write like a regular expression or parser to understand all of this. So that's where, and it's quite complex, right? Each one of us would have a different way of actually giving out this uh, conversation. So when it comes to that, That's where dialog flow comes in. So as we kind of discussed earlier, we had two platforms. One is Actions on Google. That's where you build your action or applications for the Google Assistant. Then you had Dialog Flow, where you write applications that's that involves natural language understanding, right? So natural language or conversational experiences are actually built using Dialog Flow. So Dialog Flow is one of these platforms. It's a platform that makes it incredibly straightforward to build conversational experiences. You might not even have to write any code. So today we'll actually see that in one of our code labs where we would literally not even write a single line of code to actually create like a chatbot or a voice assistant. So just keep in mind these 2 points. One is intents and entity. So we will get to the code labs to understand what those are. But on a high level, intents are basically it matches and categorizes user utterances to an intent. So let's say when you talk a specific sentence, so intent is the one which identifies that the user is talking about this specific topic. So let me kind of, hand the conversation to that intent. An entity is basically like identify keywords or phrases spoken by the user. So as I said, Dialogflow again, it provides the intuitive graphical user interface to create conversational experiences. So this is how a Dialogflow would look like. This one over here is your agent. So you would call this as a personal chef based from the example. And here you have intents and entities. So one of those intents is called recipe recommendation. And within that, all you have to do as a user is go in and fill in all the user expressions that typically your user would provide to your action. So here, the whole idea is like chicken sounds good to me. I like a cold dessert and I want it right now. So all of these conversations can be filled in. So you as a user, you don't have to write any code. You as a developer, you don't have to write any code. You basically feed user expressions or phrases that the user, typically your user would use to interact with your platform. And it is not required for you to be spot on. It's not based on command. It's based on conversations. So this is where the entire AI and ML kicks in from a dialog flow standpoint. And this is where the natural language understanding kicks in as well. So you just have to feed in, let's say, like typically from 5 to 10 to 20 sentences that you feel that the user would typically say. And then based on continuous conversations with your user, it would automatically train and keep getting better as more and more data comes through. And to kind of give a high level, integrations is where we discussed about how Dialogflow can, once you build this entire thing, you test it, you can integrate this with your Google Assistant, other platforms like Facebook Messenger, Alexa, Skype, Slackbot, and so on. So that's where you'd find in terms of integrations. And fulfillments is a section where if you would like to build your own, build an application and link it to your backend, that's where the fulfillment would come in place. So here you can see where Dialogflow fits in, right? So we had all of this previously in these two sections. We didn't really understand how it handled it. So over here, the moment the user says talk to personal chef, the Google Assistant would understand to hand it over to this action. Within that action, there will be a welcome intent. And that welcome intent will have a response saying that, what are you in the mood for? And then when again the conversation happens, when the user says, I would like X, Y, and Z, that's where the intent matching and entity extraction happens, where it is then passed on to your backend for further processing. And then the text to speech conversion happens, and then it's relayed back to the user. So this is again the same example where I'll quickly go through where it goes through the Google Assistant, Dialog Flow, and entities would understand that this person is talking about homemade cannoli. So from there, it will pass on to your webbook, and here's the response and back to the user. So in order for you to build an application, it's quite simple, straightforward, and to some extent, not even writing a single line of code. But that doesn't mean that you can just build a simple demo or an example and submit the application. We have to make sure that your conversational apps or your actions for the Google Assistant is smart enough. It goes through a conversational design to provide the users with a magical experience. So for that, Google has actually a lot of resources. So you can actually check it out over here. So you actually have checklists where what all you have to follow before you actually try submitting your application to be published, right? So before publishing your action or application, make sure that you follow all of these checklists and guidelines to make sure that you build a beautiful conversational app. So while writing the application, you can also kind of support different screens and outputs, right? So for example, you have smart speakers with no screen, so that's just an audio output, right? You have phones with both audio and uh, screen, so it's the same for the other screen outputs. So as a developer, you can either target to have an application just running on this or just based on this surface or for both, but make sure that when you're building these, there are some guidelines where your audio, you have, for example, if you're building on smart displays, you have a screen as well as an audio response. So it's not necessary that your audio response should be same as what's actually shown on the screen. So you as a developer can make sure that you take advantage of the screen to show visual cues to the user and then have another audio response so that the user understands the overall context of what he needs to do next. So these are some of the examples. I would quickly run through this. So in terms of speech and display text, if you'd like to show a conversation with a simple response, this is how it would look like, right? So you have speech and you have text, and the same is actually shown over here. And these are simple responses with suggestions. So let's say if you have a specific response to the user, and instead of say, what number do you have in mind? So instead of keeping it like a very open-ended thing, the user can say any number, but at the same time, if you want, you can actually give suggestions to the user. And this applies for all the conversations that the user is having. So you can decide if your conversation is in such a way that it's better for you to provide some suggestions. The user would automatically think, okay, so these are the kind of suggestions it's looking for, and I can provide a response by either audio or I can click on these. You also have basic cards where you have image, text, and even like links. And if you have items that you need to show in form of list, so you have less than 10 items, you can use this, right? And then like a carousel, then if you have more items, you can show it in the form of list. So all of these you can see in depth using the resources here. So there might be cases where, let's say, you might want to ask the user about you would like to know the user's name or even location. Let's say if you have a delivery app and you want to the user is using your action to have the you know uh, get a certain delivery done. So in that case, you don't want to be asking what's your address. You can actually ask uh, code in this specific line of code where it identifies the user's location and automatically send your delivery item to that specific place. So without actually going through like adding address and so on. So if you have your own auth2 server, you can link the Google Assistant, your actions with your backend, your own application. So in this case, you can see to continue link Foodshop to your Google account. And once that is done, you can send the data from your action to your backend. And based on that specific user account's preferences, you can send the response back to the user. So again, the transactions can also be done. So this is an example of that. And transactions also support a shopping cart, delivery options, order summary, and payments. So we talked about smart home device integrations. So these are some of those things where I can actually give you some demos over here as well. Right now everything is turned off.
The mic's back on.
I can say, hey Google, close the front door.
Okay, requesting to lock the front door.
And it's locked. Hey Google, open the curtains.
Okay, opening the bedroom curtain. The mic's off.
So those are some of the examples that I have like in terms of smart home automation or device integration. So I have a lot of these devices that I already have at home, and just using the assistant and with these speakers kept in different places throughout home, I can just have a control all of these devices with my voice. So if you'd like to build your own Google Assistant speaker, your own smart speaker, you would basically go to the Google, using the Google Assistant SDK, you can build your own. So it's very simple. Do try it out. And I do have a lot of resources in my website where you can actually build your own smart speaker using the Google Assistant uh, from scratch. So you have a step-by-step tutorial for that. So do check that out. So if you're not a hardcore developer, I mean, to be quite frank, we haven't touched any coding yet. So in terms of templates, the actions on Google also provides you templates. So if your action that you're planning on building falls under any of these three criteria or categories, you can quickly click on these, set up a Google Sheet, and then you know automatically have a full-fledged version of an action running. So we would do that during one of our code labs today. So what are the features of the template? You can create an action within minutes. Choose a predefined personality. So you can choose your person or character based on uh, your interest or choice. And then build without code. So just using Google Sheet, as you can see here, you can just fill in some of the templates that's been provided. Fill in the question, the answer, and then you're done. And you also have the ability to expand to different languages. So how can you reach users? There's two ways. One is by, hey, okay, G, let's talk to personal chef, right? And then there's another one which says, okay, G, ask personal chef for a hot soup. So in this case, this is the trigger phrase, this is the action name, and what that action is for. The action phrase is for a hot recipe, right? So these are the different ways you can do trigger in terms of your actions. So there's explicit actions and implicit actions. So the users will also be able to find your actions based on specific capabilities. So when you say like, hey Google, I want to work out. So based on that, if your application or action has a specific application built in, it would automatically pop that, open that and start uh, working on top of it. So we talked about the assistant. We talked about how to build, what are the tools that's there for the building one, and then we talked about what are the ways you can trigger that and how quickly you can build it using various platforms and tools, right? Once you've done with everything, that's where you move on to the next step, which is publishing your applications. Once your application or action is published, the users would find your action in this, which is the Google Assistant directory. So just like the Google Play Store, the Google Assistant directory is the place where you can go and search, you know, all the applications that's out there based on your interest. And the most important thing to note is, unlike traditional applications like for Androids or iPhones, iOS, and so on, you don't really need to have, the user doesn't need to install an application. All they need to know is the invocation name. So in this case, like talk to Headspace was one of the invocation name that we gave to the Google Assistant, and then it knew it. I didn't download that application. It automatically pulled up that action, and for the user, it's a seamless experience. They don't need to download anything. So you can actually send people links as well. So you can, once your app is published, you can generate a link. I mean, the link would be generated and you can share it with all your users. So before we move on to the code labs, I want to actually plant an idea where you think beyond just building a chatbot or a voice assistant or an action, because with the tools that we'll be looking today, it will actually kind of give you a platform to kind of strategize on how you can make these chatbots more intelligent, right? So I call this building intelligent chatbots using machine learning APIs. So some of the examples that um, I've done is basically taking the same tools but combining it with other Google Cloud APIs and other services and products to kind of have a much more meaningful uh, or intelligent experience. So one of the examples is where we use sentiment analysis. So let's say traditionally you're having a conversation with the user. The user says, here's your conversation, and okay, let's take an example. The example is, let's talk about restaurants. The moment you go into a restaurant or a hotel, you stay over there, and then typically at the end of your stay, they would say, how would you like to, can you rate your experience? So usually it's using a richer scale. You'll say like, it's 7, I'll rate it as 8 or 5 and so on. So what is a rating of 5 or 6 for me might be different from your version of 5 or 6. So how can I make sure that I gather the most like meaningful uh, feedback through the system? So that's where I had the idea of building a Google Assistant, I mean an action where the user gives the feedback in the form of a conversation. So I can just say like, the conversation is basically like, I had a great time, the food was great, but the shower was not working, and my overall experience was good. So in this case, the user is actually telling 3 things, right? He said the dining or the food experience was great. His shower was not working, so that's a bad thing. And then the overall last sentence was, he said his overall experience was good. So when you have these kind of complicated uh, conversations, what you can then do is you can go ahead and use sentiment analysis, which is a natural language, Google Cloud natural language API. Within that, you can pass the conversation from your action, pass the text to this API, and the sentiment analysis would give you a score. If the score is positive, it means that you are getting a positive score. Let's say +1. If it is -1, it's really bad. So it will also identify to extract and give you a sentiment score for each and every sentence. So you had multiple things given by the user, but you will be able to extract each of those sentences and find a score to that. So using that, you have a much more meaningful understanding of what your user is actually talking about. So this can be used in multiple ways. If you have your own products, if you'd like to understand the sentiment of the users in from Twitter or your feedback support system, you can use these. So this is an example of that. So as part of the demos that I had, and we are actually running out of time, I can quickly show you one or two demos. So this is the first one where this was done using the Google Assistant SDK.
The time is 1:34 p.m. Hey Google, how tall is Mount Everest? Mount Everest is 8,848 meters tall. Hey Google, tell me a joke. This might make you laugh. What did the teacher do with her students' report on the history of cheese? She graded it.
And as you can see, the entire device is inside the book.
Hey Google, sing a song. Finally it's here, I've been waiting for this chance. I could be on Broadway if only I could dance. Hey Google.
So that was one. So this was using the Google Assistant SDK. It has a Raspberry Pi inside. It has a mic over here. So you can actually build your own version of Google Assistant smart speakers in the way you'd like. The other one is home automation. So here you can see me controlling my lights, the vacuum robot, and also the TV.
Hey Google, it's TV time.
So the moment I set it's TV time, it would turn on my projector. It would turn on my home theater system, and then it would dim the lights in my living room, and then it would turn on the projector, right? So this would automatically connect to the TV. So so once I say stop TV, it will automatically shut down. It will turn the lights back on. So all of this was just done using one command. So when I say cleaning time, you can see that the vacuum robot is activated and it would start cleaning. So the same thing, again, at the end of the day, I can share the slides. You can have a look at all of these demos to get some inspiration and see what are the capabilities that the Google Assistant can do. So if you're interested in how to build one, you can actually go and check this out in my Medium blog as well. So that's clearly step-by-step instructions are over here. So with that, I would like to end the presentation and move on quickly to our code labs. So we have limited time, so we have to make sure that we all get on board as quickly as possible. So here are the steps. The first step to do is make sure that you open this specific link. Okay, and go to this specific site. So again, I'll leave this um, screen open and let me see if we have any comments. So let's just give a few more seconds for you guys to copy the link, and we'll also leave this link in the chat. So what I would like to do is once you copy the link, as a good practice, what I would like to do is to move to another browser, or in this case, like an incognito mode. So it's always better to do the code labs on a private window so that you don't actually get it confused with your um, personal account. Okay. So the moment you click on that, you would say enroll in this quest. So click on enroll in this quest and then choose your account. So you can either choose your existing Google account or you can choose join with email. So let me choose one. Make sure. Okay, so let's do this. So this is another account that I have. Okay, so once you are logged in, so this should be the screen that you see. Okay, so we have on the top right, the way that you find out that everything is working fine is by seeing this. So if you have a monthly subscription, that means that you have successfully enrolled in this Qwiklabs. So this kind of gives you a 1 month subscription to kind of try out a lot of these labs as well as the all the trainings that's available for under Qwiklabs as well. So do try it out and check this. So in the meanwhile, while we wait for few people to sign in, let me also make sure that I share the link to the presentation. So you guys should be getting the link to the presentation soon. And in the meanwhile, I hope everyone is logged in through Qwiklabs at this point using the link that was shown. And you should find the link to the presentation in the chat as well. So we are actually running behind time, so let's get started with the first lab. So the first things first is to kind of understand what is Qwiklabs. So Qwiklabs is a cloud training tool that's provided by Google, and it's actually a beautiful tool. I've kind of used it heavily. It helps to kind of understand the concepts. It would make sure that you understand each and every level that's involved in terms of to get certain solutions built. And it also kinds of gives you free access to cloud resources without you actually using your own account. So you would basically understand that as and when we build. So let's say, let's handle the first one. So let's look into the first hands-on lab, which is Google Assistant Quick Start using Dialog Flow. So click on the first one, and again, just to kind of give you a summary of how to use the Qwiklabs, we have the Start lab over here, right? Then you also have a score. So whenever you start the lab, Qwiklabs would automatically generate a unique Google account, password, and also a project ID. So it would actually create a Google Cloud platform account for you, and using that account, you can actually try out all of these uh, labs, right? So you don't have to use your own personal Google account to run these. You'd be using it based on the account that's been generated by the Qwiklabs. And do not click on Stop Lab. Okay, the Stop Lab does not mean that you can actually pause the lab, go somewhere and come back and resume. The moment you hit Stop Lab, you'd have to start over right from the beginning. Okay, and this is not like a quiz or a test. You can take these labs as many times as possible. You have a 1 month subscription. You can take it as long as, as many times you want. And the last one is to make sure that you complete all the steps. It's important that Qwiklabs keeps track of every step that you do based on the instructions. And once you complete that, you would complete that specific lab, and then you would have 100 out of 100 score over here. And that's when you know that you can end the lab. Okay. So let's get started. As part of the first step, make sure to go and click on Start Lab. Right? So immediately, as I mentioned, you would have a button over here which says Open Google Console. You have a username, password, and a GCP project ID, which is Google Cloud Platform project ID created for you. Right? All of this is done in the backend. Now, from there, what you do next is let's go through the overview. So in this, we already talked about what is Google Assistant. It's a personal voice assistant that offers a host of actions and integrations, from sending text to setting reminders and so on. So we do have an overall idea of what a Google Assistant is through this presentation. Okay, and soon you'll find out Actions, which is Actions on Google platform, is a platform for developing Google Assistant applications. So we covered that aspect as well. And for building conversational apps, we use Dialog Flow, which uses underlying machine learning and natural language understanding schema to build rich assistant applications. Okay, so what we'll learn in this lab, we'll learn how to differentiate between basic components and services that make up an assistant application. We will create an actions project. We will integrate Dialog Flow with an actions project. We will build a Dialog Flow intent that handles quotation responses. Update your Google permission settings and test your application. I mean, don't get overwhelmed with all of these. It's very simple, so we'll take it one step at a time. And as you can also see that the moment you start the lab, there's a timer going on, so we have to make sure that we complete within that specific time, right? So now that you have an idea of how to use Qwiklabs, so the first step is let's make sure that you click on this. So click on Open Google Console. It would open up a tab. So the main thing that you have to keep in mind is make sure that you provide you're logged in using the credentials that's provided by Qwiklabs, not your personal account. So keep that in mind. Do not log in with your personal account. So use the password. So hit next. Once you're done, hit accept. hit done, and with that, let's agree to the terms and conditions, agree and continue. So this is the Google Cloud Platform. So you have, as you can see on the top, this is where all your projects are listed. This is about your project info, where it gives you your project name, project ID, and your number. These are the API requests that's been happening. So this is your dashboard view. And as you can see, Google Cloud Platform provides you with a host of products and services, right? So right from storage to compute to networking, anything to do with AI, big data, machine learning, everything is available over here under one platform. So the next step is to create an actions project. So we clicked on this the Google Console project. We are in Google Cloud Platform Console. Okay, and the next one to do is, before we start building our quotation generator, so that's the app or action that we are going to build. Let's review the following terms one by one. So Google Assistant is a virtual assistant that's found on smartphones, homes, and host of other devices, right? Actions on Google is a developer platform that allows you to build applications for the Google Assistant. So let's take our first step. So open a new tab in your browser and go to the actions on Google Developer Console. Let's open a new tab. Right click on that link. Make sure that, as you can see it's kind of shift to my account. So I'm gonna go back to the other account that I have. So I can go and right click on that and see that, okay, now this is the Qwiklabs account, right? You can close that. And the next step is to create a project. So click on a new project, and to kind of give you a high level overview, this is the actions on Google platform, right? So this is the console. Click on new project, terms and conditions, agree and continue. And on the next screen, you can actually see project name. So over here, since we already created a project was already created by default for you once we activated it from Qwiklabs. The moment you click on this, it will kind of auto-populate this. So this is the same Google Cloud Project ID that's been available for you. So if you notice this, that's been provided for you by Qwiklabs, and if you go to your Google Cloud Console, all of them are the same. Okay, so let's select that and hit import project. So while the project is being created, right? So this might take a couple of minutes. In this case, it's already done. Let's go and review what needs to be done next. So we did this, we added or imported a project, right? And then we selected a project ID. And once that is done, we are actually in the dashboard of the actions on Google platform. So now it's time to test our understanding. So below are multiple choice questions. So let's see. The virtual assistant that's found on smartphones, homes, and a host of other devices. I hope that everyone can answer this at this point. It is the Google Assistant. The developer platform that allows you to build assistant applications. So we went through this again, right? So we looked at two tools to build. One is the actions, right? The actions on Google platform. So that's the developer platform that allows you to build assistant applications. And finally, a platform that abstracts the complexities of natural language understanding and machine learning to build conversational applications. What is that? That's nothing but Dialog Flow. So we are progressing a bit, so that's a good sign. So let's move on to the next one. So set up Dialog Flow. So from the left hand menu, click on Build Actions and add your first action. Then select Custom Intent and Build. So for users who would find this a bit difficult to understand, make sure that this one is, once you go to the Actions console, the UI has been changed recently. So what you can do is click on Overview, right? Once you click on Overview, you have Build Your Action. Click on Build Your Action, it would expand, so you can click Add Actions, right? And once you click on Add Actions, you can go and click on Add Your First Action. So this is the screen that you're in. So if you actually cross-check with your Qwiklabs, so this is the screen that we are in. Make sure it is in Custom Intent and Build. So it is Custom Intent, and let's click Build. Make sure that you, so this again, if I convert this to English, so it's Dialog Flow wants to access your Google account, right? So in this case, you're giving your this specific Google account with this GCP project ID. Uh, Dialog Flow is actually wanting to access your Google account for these permissions. So let's allow that. Okay, so immediately from there we move to Dialog Flow. So again, as I said, Dialog Flow is a platform where we actually build our natural language, our conversational experiences, right? So let's accept the terms and conditions and hit accept. So immediately you're brought into Dialogflow console. So you can see over here console.dialogflow.com, and you have your project ID automatically filled in. So let's see what the lab says. Once you're done, you will then be brought to a Dialogflow agent. Click create on the top right corner. So let's do that. Create. And while that is being created, let's look at what we have in the labs. So in the last few steps, you were introduced to some new terms. Let's take a moment to review them. An action. An action is an interaction built for Google Assistant that performs specific tasks based on user input, right? And then the next one is intent. The goal of the action, an intent takes user input and channels it to trigger an event. An agent is a module that uses NLU and ML to transform user input to actionable area. So if you are actually wondering what are these, this is what it is. So once you create a project, right? So this is your project and this is your agent. These are your intents, right? So let's move on and check. So this is one way of checking the progress, right? So as of at this point, do we have have we completed all the steps? So let's see. Doesn't look like. What are we missing? So we did create the app. Is this created in the right account? Yes. Yeah, there goes. So create a Dialogflow agent. So uh, we have completed the progress till this point, right? So immediately on the top right, you have to notice that we have the score. So now the score is moved to 50 automatically. So we've almost kind of completed 50% of this, and we have the remaining to go. So we have 17 minutes left for this lab to end. So let's make sure that we kind of quickly run through this. So build a custom dialog flow intent. So from the left hand side, select intents, create an intent, and then for the name, enter code generator. So this is where you're going to create your own intent, right? So copy this, go back to dialog flow. Okay. So these, when you click on this by default, this would show you the default intents. So you have two intents, which is the default welcome intent. This is where the user is greeted by default, and the fallback intents. So fallback intents are intents which would basically be like if the agent is not able to, your action is cannot understand what the user is talking about, it would typically fall under the fallback intent, right? So for this, let's go and create a new one. Make sure that you click on this plus icon, and from there, copy and paste the code generator and save it. Okay, so we've created an intent right now. So the way how you can check that is if you go back to intents now, you would see that you've already created code generator. So click on that again. So we still have some steps that we need to do. So we've created an intent. So what's the next step? The next step is we are creating a code generator. So of course we'll have to provide Dialogflow with some of the sample phrases that the user might ask, right? So let's copy and paste these quickly. So go to training phrases and click on add training phrase. Let's copy the second one. So these are generally what some of the phrases that the user might ask. And it's not necessary that every time the user talks, they have to kind of speak in the specific manner. It is just for you to train you as a developer. You can actually train these phrases. And if the user is having a conversation which is anywhere similar to this based on the context, it would immediately trigger this intent, right? So this intent gets triggered, and then it will check, okay, it's similar to this training phrase. So what's the response, or what's the action that I should do or take? So at the bottom, so once we've done with adding training phrases, at the bottom in responses section, add response and add in these uh, Shakespeare quotes. So let's do that. Go back to dialog flow. So we entered our training phrase. Let's go and add a response. So every time you talk to your action through the Google Assistant, it would identify that it needs to be handed over to dialog flow, and based on the intent, it would then pass on the specific responses, right? So it's at a time it would randomly select one of these responses since we are providing multiple, and it would then be provided back to the user. So we did all the steps. So we've added all the responses, we've added all the training. Make sure you hit save. You can see that the intent saved. At the same time, you would also find an agent training started and agent training completed. So this is where the machine learning kicks in, right? Now we've completed all the steps. Let's make sure that if our progress is complete, perfect. So as of at this point, we have completed all the tasks. So our score is 100 out of 100. Now to test our code generator, I mean, we just built it. We would, of course, love to have this working, right? So how to get that done? So before we start, always remember if you're doing this for the very first time using an account, you always have to go to activity controls to enable permissions. So this is required for you to make sure that you are actually on the Qwiklabs account, right? make sure you're under the Qwiklabs account and enable these permissions. So this is required for your assistant to run because it needs voice and audio activity, device information, and so on. So once you do with web activity, device information, and voice and audio, you should be done. So go back. We've turned on all the three from the activity controls page. Now let's test our understanding. Below are multiple choice questions. So an interaction built for the Google Assistant that performs specific tasks based on user input. So that's an action. A module that NLU and ML to transform user input to actionable data to be used by the assistant application, right? A module that uses NLU and ML to transform user input into actionable data to be used by the assistant that is going to be, oh, sorry, it's going to be an agent. So the agent is the module, right? That handles all of the ML and AI capabilities. And then takes user input and channels it to a trigger event. This we know because that's an intent, right? Fine. So I think with that, let's go ahead and test this out. We have 10 minutes left still. So I hope you guys are actually following along and you're in the same space. So as part of this, the next step is to actually go ahead and test this on the simulator. So for that, go back to the actions on Google console, right? And go to test. Okay. And here you can go ahead and test your application.
Sure, let's get the test version of my test app. Hello, how can I help you?
So I can go ahead and type this in.
The course of true love never did run smooth.
So immediately you can see that just by having giving a query, we got the response back. And these were responses that we built from Dialog Flow, right? So I said, give me a quote. And also I said, these are the responses that we provided. And as part of that responses, we got one of those responses back. So this is the way how you can test your actions for the Google Assistant. And few things to keep in mind. These are the surfaces. So let's say if this is typically a phone, so you'd basically have a display as well as audio. If you switch this, so let's say, let me cancel it. If we switch this to a speaker, so this doesn't have any display. So everything that you hear would be based on just the conversation, right? It will read back. And if you have a smart display, you can do the same thing. So let's try another one.
Sure, here's the test version of my test app. Greetings, how can I assist?
So let's say that instead of typing, I can also talk to it. And let me give a sentence that's not there. Can you give me a random quote? I think my mic is not working. So let's say, give me a random quote.
If music be the food of love, play on.
So you can see that it's been displayed as well. And the audio response as well. Oh, the reason why it didn't work was because I had to allow this. Yeah. So with that, I think we are done for the first lab. We have 7 minutes left. And this was basically it. So congratulations to all the users who finished their first lab. So this was our first step in this Cloud Study Jam. And the next steps that you need to do is go ahead and click on End Lab because we've hit already the score. Click on OK and submit. Rate it and submit. So once you're done with that, so hit the back icon, and you would immediately see that as part of this quest, so the quest is a collection of labs, right? As part of this quest, the first lab was already done, right? So we would then move on immediately to the second lab. Okay, so uh, as a user, what you need to make sure is, for today, go ahead and try out 4 of these labs. We'll be, we will try and cover as much as possible within the specified time, but go ahead and cover at least 4 of these labs. And if you have time, go ahead and cover all of these. You would automatically uh, complete the quest, and a digital badge would be generated for you, right? And this badge can then be showcased. So on your left hand side, you have My Learning. So go and have a look at that. So within My Learning, you would go to Public Labs. So here you would see your progress, but if you want to share your badges to the public, or your employer and so on, go and click on Public Profile, and within Public Profile you'll get to see how many labs taken and how many quests is done. So this is a sample um, account that I just created, but I can also show you how my actual one looks like at the end of the lab, right? So I have around like 100 plus labs taken with multiple batches, and you have the ability to directly connect with your uh, LinkedIn account as well. So now that we have completed the first lab, let's go ahead and start the second one. So I'm sure now everyone is comfortable using Qwiklabs, so it's going to be quite straightforward. So I'll go ahead and make sure that all the other tabs are closed. Click on the second one. So this is customizing templates. So in this lab, what we'll be doing is, one of the things that we uh, learned in the presentation, which is to build Google Assistant actions or applications using templates. So this is where we'll be working with Google Sheets, right? So go ahead and start the lab. Make sure you use the use subscription button. And from there, let's do the same old procedure. Open Google Console. So this would create a new account. Let's make sure I'm in English. This is the old one, so it's already signed out, so you cannot use it. We'll have to use the account that's been generated over here. So click on use another account, copy the first one, copy the password, hit accept, and this is pretty much the same exercise for most of these labs, right? The moment you click on start lab, you can make sure that you do all of this by default. Cool. So now that um, we've come to the Google Cloud Platform console, let's go back and see what this lab is about. So again, we know about Google Assistant. So in this lab, you will build a trivia assistant application from an actions template that utilizes SSML. SSML is nothing but speech synthesis markup language. Just like HTML, SSML kinds of gives you the ability to um, you know provide more uh, actions on top of your existing response. So if your response is just a simple text, and you'd like to add some audio, or you'd like to make sure that your response has a specific tone, or expression, you can use SSML to do that. And actions templates allows you to build Google Assistant applications like trivia games, flashcard generators, etc., without writing a single line of code, right? So what we'll learn in this, so we will learn how to build an assistant application with a flashcards template, okay? Then we will host MP3 files. So let's say if you want to add music to your response, we will add MP3 files to our cloud storage. So that's again, we would cover the under GCP. And then after storing the files, we would generate flashcard questions and answers in different languages with the Cloud Translation API. Okay, and those MP3 files that we store in our Google Cloud Storage would then be used by our application, the Assistant application. And finally, we would test our application and features that we have added with the Action Simulator. So those are basically what we learned today. So as part of the first step, we've done all of these, we've created. So let's go ahead and create the same stuff. Right click and go to Actions on Google. Make sure that you're on the right account. So I'm on the right account. So let me cross check and verify. Yes. So click on New Project. The same steps from the previous. Agree and continue the terms of service. Click and automatically import your project ID. So in this case, we have done that. Import the project. And for this lab, I would also be moving a bit faster because we are kind of aware of some of these steps. And if you miss certain steps, you can follow the labs or you can also check out the video later. Uh, so let's make sure that our thing is done. So we have successfully landed here. Scroll down and you'll find the more options header. Click on the templates card. So this is the templates option. So use Google Sheets to build actions without any code. So let's click on that. So we are over here in this section. So let's see our progress as of this section. So we've completed that specific section. And from there, let's go ahead and start adding, choosing our actions template. And from the template, let's also go ahead and choose a personality or persona and set in the configurations. So as part of the first step, here we are working with flashcards, right? So go ahead and click on flashcards. You can go ahead and choose any of the personas. So you can go ahead and here.
I like that answer because it's right. Pencils down. The game is over. And now for your score.
So each one has their own persona and sound effects and voice. So you can choose one. So let's choose this. Hit next. So fill in your contents. So go ahead and click Get Started. So the moment you click on Get Started, this would give you the template, right? So here you can see to use this template, click on the link and follow the instructions. So go ahead and click on this flashcards template. This would automatically open up Google Sheets, right? Where it would make a copy of the template. So let's go ahead and click on Make a Copy. Cool. So let me just cross check that I'm on the right account. Yes, I am. So this is your entire actions template. So it's as easy as this. If you want to go ahead and add any types of questions, you can do so. In the future, if you'd like to completely change this from, basically from baby animal names to something else, you can have any kind of question, the answer, make changes to the configuration, and you're done. You have a completely done actions or applications for the Google Assistant without any line of code, right? So what's next step? So we've completed all this. We come to this section. We have the Google Sheet open. And now what we need to do is let's go ahead and add some of these questions and answers. So copy this, go to row 39, and let's go ahead and paste this. I should be able to paste. Yeah. So once you paste this, just make sure that there are no extra spaces at the end, otherwise it wouldn't work. So we have to make sure that whatever we've copied is perfect. So yeah, so now we have all of these. So we have the questions, 3 questions added, which is what is the baby animal name for bat, cow, and snake. We have the answers, and we also have the hint, right? Now from that, let's see what's the next step. So keep this Google Sheet tab open. So don't close it. We'll still be working with that sheet throughout this entire lab. Moving on. So we've kind of created till this section, and from there we'll go ahead and create a Google Cloud Storage bucket. So this is where we kind of discuss. We would be kind of downloading some MP3 files to add some music to our action. So how we can do that is, I mean, there's multiple ways of doing it. If you have a URL, public URL with a sound effect already there, you can do so. You can also go ahead and, get some of these sound effects from, uh, if you have your own MP3 files, you can host it in Google Cloud Storage and make it available as well. So first step, go to storage, browser, and create bucket. So go back to your Google Cloud Platform console, so your GCP console, and go to storage. So if you're like this, click on the navigation menu, make sure that you go to the storage section, and within the storage section, click on browser. So here, go ahead and create a bucket. So typically it would ask you to enter your bucket name. So this needs to be a unique name, right? So pick a globally unique name. So what I typically do for these labs is I go ahead and copy my project ID, and you can go ahead and paste it as your bucket name, right? Hit continue, choose multi-regional. Again, if you want your data to be accessed across multiple regions, is the best settings for that. So do that, click continue, and then go ahead and create. Okay, so now we have a bucket created. As you can see, if you go back to browser, you'd find a bucket is created with a bucket ID, which is nothing but your project ID. And within that, there are no files at this point. So let's go ahead and check our progress so far. So we are done with that. So we are 50% through. That's good. So let's go ahead and see what are the next ones. So next one is to copy the files, right? So how can we do that? So go ahead and copy this line of code, right? And before that, go back to your GCP console and go to your Cloud Shell. So this button over here on the top right corner, activate your Cloud Shell. So Cloud Shell is your own like persistent um, virtual machine that's available for you within your entire project, and it has all the available tools pre-installed within this instance. So go ahead and click Start Cloud Shell. Okay, so now that the Cloud Shell is Ready? So again, you can see this is nothing but your Google account and this is your project ID. So over here, go ahead and paste the first line of code, which is to copy the files, right? So you're using a gsutil command. It's a util command to copy to Google Cloud storage files. So copy files from this bucket, which is already there. So this is a storage path, which is already there with mp3 files.zip. Copy to your directory. So let's go ahead and do the first step. Once that is done, you can actually go ahead and check if the files are actually transferred over to your directory. So let's type ls and check that. You can see that the zip file is already there. Now from the zip file, you have to unzip it, right? So let's go ahead and unzip the zip file and get all the files. So go back and paste it. You can see that the unzip has been complete. Let's go ahead and check that. So we have the folder and all the files under that. Now as of this step, we have just copied over some mp3 files from an existing location to your own project directory, right? Now from your project, you have to make sure that uh, you transfer these to the Google Cloud, your cloud storage bucket, right? So the way how you do that is using the same gsutil command. So go ahead, paste this, and here what you need to do is instead of your bucket name, go ahead and provide your bucket name. So you can see over here your bucket name is nothing but your project ID, or you can even quickly, if you want to quickly copy, you can always go back to your GCP project ID, copy that, because we are using the same thing. So go ahead and paste that. Okay. So what we are doing with the gsutil is we are copying all the files under this folder, which is GSP280 MP3 files. Copy all those files and then copy it to this specific location, which is GS Qwiklabs project ID. So this is our bucket. So let's see if that works. Hit enter and you can see that it's copying all the files. And once that is done, you can go ahead and check whether these files are successfully uh, copied to your bucket. So go ahead and click on refresh bucket. And if people don't see this, you can easily find this under cloud storage browser. So this is your bucket name. Within your bucket name, now you have a folder, and within that folder you have your mp3 files. So you can ignore about this file, but these are the three files, mp3 files that we'll be using today. Okay, so let's go ahead and check our progress. So far so good. So we've done 70% of the steps. We still have time, so let's go ahead and make sure that we quickly run through these, right? So what we'll do next is we have to have three different things. So this is typically done in the configuration. So whenever there's an audio game intro, you would basically play this mp3 file, banjo short. If it is a audio game outro, it's going to be country Q. And if anything to do with a ding, audio ding, it's going to be beep short. Fine. So add mp3 files to your template. So now that we've copied the files to our cloud storage bucket, we can go ahead and see if this works. And at the same time, you can go ahead and click on one of these. So go ahead and click on these. You can, so as you can see, you can hear the mp3 files as well. So what you can do is copy this link on the top, okay? Go back to the sheet. So let's go and check what exactly the lab says. So we need to go ahead and set audio game intro, audio game outro, and audio ding into our sheets. So go back to your flashcards game Google Sheet, right? So you have two tabs. One is the question and answers, and the other one is the configuration. So let's hit the configuration part. Let me make this big for you guys. So let's go ahead and add those configurations. So we have audio game intro. So that's gonna be banjo short. So we did get the URL from here. And again, if you have doubts how to get the URL, go back to your cloud storage, click on banjo short, open this in a new tab, copy this link from the top and paste it over here. The next one is audio game outro. So go back to the MP3 files. That's gonna be country Q. So let's click on that. Do the same step. So go ahead and copy that link and go back to your sheet and paste it over here. And finally, we have audio ding. And that includes the same step. So we go back, choose beep short, copy that and paste it. So with that we have successfully kind of configured our MP3 files that's stored in our cloud storage bucket back into the sheet, right? So we've done all of these steps. Now it's time to build and test our action, right? So if you remember, if you go back to your actions on Google, we are still in step one. So step one was your the ability for you to make a copy of the flashcards template. We did that. We went and modified added few questions and answers over there. We also went ahead and created a cloud storage bucket. We copied over some files into that. We made sure that we added few configurations into the configurations tab where we are providing audio intro, outro, and ding. And from there, we pasted the URLs of the audio from the cloud storage bucket and configure. Now the next one is to hit the next button. Here we have to upload the Google Sheet. So what you can typically do is go back to your Google Sheet, copy this entire thing, or even from here. You can also copy the entire thing. So once that is done, go back to your actions on Google, make sure that you paste it and upload. And if at all you have any errors, it would show up over here. That means some configuration is wrong. So you might have some special characters or extra spaces around your text. So make sure that that's not the case. And let's go and check if we are following along. Yes, and click on Create App. So go ahead and click on Create App. So while that's happening, let's go ahead and check what are the next steps. So the next steps again, as a standard practice, is to go and make sure that all the permissions are turned on for these three settings. And once that is done, we should be able to go ahead and test our actions. Yep, so our action is created. Now let's go ahead and click on Go to Simulator. Yeah, so before that it automatically kind of told me that you have not activated it. So visit the activity controls, make sure that I'm on the right account. Yes, enable the 3 items. So the 3 items are enabled, and I can go back now and see if our application is working, right? So as part of the first step, let's talk to our application. So one of the things that I kind of missed out in our previous conversation is whenever you build an application, by default, until and unless, let's say, you have your application approved, or you can, until and unless you provide an invocation name, that's done in the previous steps, you would always address your application by talk to my test app. So this is the way how you trigger your action. So go ahead and enter.
Sure, here's the test version of my test app.
So you can,
Hey, over there. Time to get fired up for the fun flashcards game. Let's get the ball rolling. Here's the deal. I'll ask you something, and you just respond with the answer that you think is right. Are you ready to play?
so if you actually notice, the moment our application said here's a test version of the test app, there was an intro song. So that song actually came from our audio intro MP3 URL that we linked to the sheet, right? And then once we say go ahead and say yes,
Let's start off with this one. What's the baby animal name for pigeon?
so you can go ahead and go to your questions. So it's a squab, and go back to your simulator, try answering that.
Perfect. Way to go. How about this one? What's the baby animal name for bear?
So you can see that you would also find a ding sound, right? After every conversation, you would find a ding sound. So that's the second or the third audio that we configured. So that's coming from this specific sound. And finally, what we can do is when I say, let's say, cancel or quit, it would end the conversation.
Okay, your score was 1 out of 5. I hope you practice again soon. See you later.
And after the outro song, it ends the conversation. So we kind of built an entire application using just Google Sheet at up till this point, right? But we are still not done. So let's go ahead and take a step further by adding in different languages, right? So we've gone and tested all of this. Now add a flashcard template in another language, right? So the way how you do that is again go to Actions on Google, go to Develop, click on Actions. So right now you can see that your actions is on English, right? So you can go ahead and click on Modify Languages, choose Spanish, and save. Okay, so once that is done, go back to again Develop your actions, and you'd find that right now you have another tab for Spanish. So from there, we do the same steps over and over again. So you choose a personality, in this case, the robot, and from there, fill in your contents. So we go ahead and do the same stuff. So now we've come back to our template again. So this time it's all gonna be in Spanish. So make a copy first. So click on that, make a copy. So you can see that the language is Spanish. Let's also make sure it's under the right account. Yes, so we are done with that. Now we need to add those three questions, answers, and hints, right? But unfortunately, I'm not, let's say, I don't know how to translate those from English. So I can either go and do this using a Google Translate and so on. But at the same time, this is also an opportunity where you can use Google Cloud APIs to do this for you. And this can be in multiple ways. Maybe you can build an application where you're using the Translate API and you're directly updating these questions. So that's another way of doing it. But the whole purpose of the lab is for you to understand how you can go ahead and use all the different APIs that's available within the Google Cloud platform to build different solutions, right? So as part of the next step, we are trying to create our support Spanish language for our actions, I mean for our action that we just created using the Google Sheet. So now let's go ahead and see if our uh, how to do the translation. So for this first step, return to the GCP console from the navigation menu, use APIs and services and library. So how we do that is go ahead and go back to the GCP console, click on the navigation menu, go to APIs and services and click on library. So with the library, let's go ahead and search for Translate API. So we have the Google Translation API. Click on that. Yeah, so you can see that it's already activated. If you don't see manage, if you see a button called enable, make sure you enable it. Okay, but for this lab, it's already enabled for you, so you should see the screen, right? So once you are in this specific screen, the next thing that you need to do is to create a service account. So before we can use the translation API, we need to create a service account key. Open the navigation menu, select APIs and services and credentials. Then click the create credentials drop down from the menu and select the service account key, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So go back, APIs and services, and click on the credentials. So once you are in the credentials page, go ahead and click on this create credentials drop down, choose service account, and within service account, go ahead and click on from the drop down, click on new service account. Okay, so now we'll have to create a service name. So this API, the service API basically acts as an intermediary, a person that kinds of handles all the uh, uh, handing over of API calls within your GCP platform or project. Okay, so for this service account, it will act throughout my project. So go ahead and choose, let's put a name. So the name should be, it can be anything, but for the purpose of this lab, let's go ahead and say translation-API. Select role, so go to project and editor, right? So let's make sure that these are the settings, and by default it's gonna be JSON. So go ahead and click on create. So what this does is it would create a service account for you. It would create a key, and that key is then downloaded onto your computer. So right now you'll find a file that's been downloaded to your browser. So go ahead and, and that would automatically be in your downloads folder. Okay, so let's see what's the next step. So as of this step, let's go ahead and check whether we've completed our task. So we created a service account and we have downloaded the service account key to our computer. Now the key is in our computer, and let's go ahead and add this key to our uh, Google Cloud Platform project ID within our project. So how we do that is, first step is select the JSON file and upload it into the Cloud Shell. So go ahead. So we have the Cloud Shell already open. For users who have closed this, not to worry, you can always trigger this and have the Cloud Shell open. Okay. So what you can do next is, on the top right, you would find the three dots. Click on Upload File, go to Downloads, and make sure that you pick the so this is the API key. So go ahead and open that. Yeah, so let's check. Yeah, so that's the JSON file. So we've kind of successfully uploaded it. Now the next step would be to go ahead and read it. So for example, run the following command in Cloud Shell to get the complete path to your service account file, right? Replace your service account key with the file's name. So let's go ahead and do that. And before this, you can also see that this file, once it is uploaded successfully, let's go ahead and check where that file is. It should be in our directory. Yeah, so you can see that the file is already there. So go ahead and copy the first one, copy that, paste it, and replace it with the entire file. So go ahead and, so the moment you highlight that, it's automatically copied. So Control V to paste it. So now you have the path to your service account key, right? So it's under home, your Google account, then the project. Now with that, let's go ahead and see the output should resemble. We already saw that. Now with the following command, we'll set the environment variables for Google application credentials to the path to the service account key. So replace the path with the output of the previous step. So let's set this as an environment variable. So go ahead and click on that, paste it, and instead of the path, go ahead and select the entire thing. Okay. Now that your service account credentials are in proper place, you are ready to make translation API requests. You'll be translating the English flashcards questions we added earlier into Spanish. Okay, so as part of this, now this is where we'll be using a simple curl command. So these are the questions that we added earlier in English. So what we are doing right now is using this curl command. We are just passing in the questions one by one. So what's a baby animal for bat, cow, and snake? And here within the curl request, we are saying it's a post request. We are providing all of these along with And since we have the service account already set, this should actually work. So let's go ahead and copy this, paste this. So as you can see, we immediately got the translated data back in the form of JSON. So we have the translated text, which was this. It was also able to identify that the request that we sent was in English, so the source language is English, and so on. So from here, it's very easy for us to now go ahead and click on copy. Again, some of you would be wondering why we have to do this. We can just use Google Translate app to do so. This is not to showcase that, this is to showcase how you can use other APIs in conjunction with the application. So you can actually have this process as part of a different application process or within a specific layer of your entire application so that the automatic translations can happen. So this lab is just to demonstrate that. So make sure you go back to the Spanish version. So let's start pasting each one of these. So paste the values only, go back Cloud Shell, copy the second one, and the last one. So we completed the questions. So the same way, we'll be calling this for the answers as well as the hints. So let's do that quickly. So let's call the next API. So the next API is gonna be again for all the answers, translating from pup, calf, and hatchling. So go ahead and do that again in the Cloud Shell using the curl command. And the reason why all of this is working is because we had a service account key created right earlier, and that's been set in the environment variable. So whenever you're calling this API, it's using that API key to provide access and then do the translation, right? So go ahead and copy these. And I think we did miss out one question, or did I just overwrite it on the first one? Okay, so let's do this again. First one, the second one, and by now I think you all got what the whole concept is. So let's actually do this quickly and see it in action. So we are done with the answers, and the last step is to do the same thing for the hints, right? So if you want to see the hints in action, make sure when you're doing the simulation, instead of answering it right, um, just say you don't know or something like that, then it should actually give you a hint to, it would automatically come to this section and give you a hint. So that's how it works. So we are almost there. So we completed all the steps over here. We filled in our sheet. So this is for Spanish. So let's go back to the labs. So once that is done, the same procedure. So go ahead and click on go back to the actions on Google Console, hit next. Now let's copy the sheet. So copy the entire sheet and paste it. Click on upload. So your content was successfully uploaded, and hit create app. So while this is going on, let's see if we have anything else that we need to do. So as part of the application, you would say yes in Spanish, go through and see if whether it's working. And once that is done, we're done. And you can also see that the score is already turned to 100 out of 100. So let's quickly check this and see how our application works in Spanish, right? So right now, first steps we did it in English, and right now we have a Spanish version. Go to the simulator. So as you can see, the Spanish language is activated. And if at all you have multiple languages and you want to test it and you want to see where to go and change it, you can go and change it over here under the languages. Okay. So let's try this and see if it works.
Aquí tienes la última versión de mi aplicación de prueba.
And say see.
Vamos al lío. ¿Cómo se conoce a la cría del oso?
Okay, so you can see that our application is actually, or action is actually working in Spanish. So go ahead and hit cancel. So let's end this.
Mi aplicación de prueba no responde en este momento. Prueba de nuevo más tarde.
And that was your end response along with the conversation ending. So with that, congratulations, we have completed our second lab. So to summarize, we created an app quickly using Google Sheet, right? Without any codes. We copied over some MP3 files and configured it within the sheet, right, to have some audio effects. Finally, we tested the application with all the audio and the new questions that we have added. Finally, with that, we wanted to take it a step further and have another version of the application in Spanish language. So we have the entire action built on Spanish. So we follow the same thing. We chose Spanish as the language, went ahead and created a sheet, made a copy of that. We pasted all the contents. We gave in the sheet, and finally we used the translate APIs using the Google Cloud translate API and service accounts to make sure that we can call APIs by passing certain strings, and then we got the translated text, which is then fed back into our sheet. And with that, finally, we were able to have our application running successfully with the Spanish version. So that's how you can quickly kind of support uh, an entire action or build actions easily using templates if you feel that your action is similar to what we did today, right? So we have those 3 templates to play with. So we are still 28 minutes to go, so which is a good sign. So let's go ahead and end this lab. And rate it and hit submit. So let me check while you guys are doing that. Let me check if there's any questions. So with that, let's move on to the next one. So the next lab is introductions to APIs in Google. Again, due to time constraints, I'll be quickly running through with this. Uh, talking about the main concepts. So you can actually go ahead and take time reading the entire thing one by one. And the whole idea is whether we can cover this uh, as many labs as possible. So let's go ahead and click on the next one. The same procedure. So let's go ahead and click on Start Labs. And before I do that, let me go ahead and close all the remaining tabs. So we are done with that specific lab, right? So as part of the next step, click on Start Lab, use subscription, and let's do the basics. So let's go ahead and open the Google console, create a new account, use another account, sorry, and then copy and paste the credentials provided by Qwiklabs. And finally, the terms of service. So as of now, this has been a standard, right? So this is our third lab. So we've done the same thing. So any of the labs that you do, you can actually follow along, but these are the typical steps to be followed in the beginning, right? Now, what's the high-level overview of this lab? It's all about APIs. So APIs, or application programming interfaces, are software app programs that give developers access to computing resources and data. Companies from different fields offer publicly available APIs so that developers can integrate specialized tools, services, or libraries with their own applications and code base. So here, the main thing to kind of understand is, for people who are not aware of what an API is, it's nothing but a application programming interface for kind of connecting different products and services, um, and the whole idea is to kind of, I think we've already kind of witnessed this to some extent in our previous lab. We used the translation API, so that was an example, right? So we used the translation API to pass on a specific text and then give us a specific response back. So that's a clear example or a simple example of what an API is. So the products and services that we use heavily every day, like let's say all the products from Google, all the products from all the different companies, they will have their own APIs, or they would use external APIs to pass information back and forth within two different systems, right? So this lab will teach you about the architecture and basic functioning of APIs. This will be supplemented with hands-on practice where you will configure and run cloud storage APIs method in Google Cloud Shell. So what are the objectives? You will learn about Google APIs. We already have some idea about how we did that. We'll talk about API architecture, HTTP protocols and methods, endpoints, REST, JSON, and API authentication services. So let's go ahead and set this up. So we did all of these steps to begin with. So what is an API and why? So I think we kind of went through that. APIs are built with developers in mind and oftentimes do not offer a graphical user interface. However, there are exceptions to this standard. Google has released a new tool called API Explorer, which allows you to explore various Google APIs. So this we did see. If you go to the Google Cloud platform, if you go to APIs and services, if you click on library, you can search for all the APIs that's out here. You can see the amount of categories that's already available for you. So these are all different types of APIs. So if you remember during my presentation, I mentioned about how I used the Google Cloud Natural Language API to do some sentiment analysis. That's done using this specific API. I use this API to pass the information that I got from my action. I pass it on to the Cloud Natural Language API. It does the sentiment analysis and returns back with the score. So that's typically how an API works, right? So moving on, APIs in GCP, Google offers APIs that can be applied to many different fields and sectors. So we already went through with that using the API Explorer. So I'll be skipping over some of these so you can actually take time to read this, but I'll be covering the main topics. So the API library offers quick access, documentation, and configuration options for 200 plus Google APIs, right? So let's do some hands-on practice by enabling an API. So go ahead, assume that you're a mobile developer for a fitness site and you want to use the Google Fitness API. So as I said, we as a company, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm a Chief Technology Officer at Qwiklabs. We are a connected health company, so we have worked with fitness APIs from Google. So the ability for us to kind of use this API to fetch users steps, activities, calories, distance covered, all of this information, we can retrieve it using this API. So that's an example of that. So let's go ahead and do that. So go back to libraries. Let's search for fitness. So we have the fitness API, click on that. So immediately you have the API page where you have an overview, tutorials and documentations, all of these things are available for you. So it's actually quite easy for you to quickly have a understanding about what this API is all about. So as you can see, the API is automatically, it's not enabled for us. So let's go ahead and enable it. So right now we are enabling this fitness API for our project. So we have success. So once you're done, you would basically see the screen. So this is where it gives you overview of your API, what it is, and then once you start using it, you would also see the traffic data over here. You'd see various metrics based on different API calls that's been done. Okay, so if you return to the fitness API, you will see in the API is now enabled. So go ahead and click the back arrow twice. As well. So click on APIs and services and click on dashboard. Right? So over here at the bottom, you can actually go and have a look at the fitness API. So click on that. And this was the page that we were in, right? So click on dashboards, we selected that. And then the other important thing is also to understand about quotas, right? So as this API, what's the available quota that I have? So the queries per day, the limit is 86,400 queries can be done per day. Queries per 100 second per user, it's 500. Queries per 100 seconds is 1,000. So you would know the basic limitations of these APIs as well in terms of the available quota provided to you. Now, let's take an understanding. Let's take a quick test. Answer the following multiple choice. Offers quick access, documentation, and configuration options for 200 plus Google APIs. So I believe that's the API library. So let's check that. That's correct. Details your project's usage of specific APIs, including traffic levels, error rates, and even latencies. So that's gonna be our dashboard. Fine. So moving on from there, let's go and understand the API architecture. So APIs are a set of methods that allows programmers to communicate with one another, right? So let's consider this, the client server model, right? So you have different clients. So clients are nothing but, let's say, your browsers or computers or mobile phones or tablets. These are all clients. So when they actually send a request through the internet to your server, the server will understand that, okay, a client has asked for a request, you do a specific response. So the response can be, for example, the server has data or computing resources stored in it. Its job is to interpret and fulfill a client's request. So the client will send a request, the server will understand that request, either provide some extra data and then send that data back to the client, right? So that's the client server model architecture. Now, in terms of HTTP protocol and request methods, since APIs use the web as a communication channel, many of them adhere to the HTTP protocol. So as part of the HTTP protocol, we have the most commonly used HTTP request methods are get, post, put, and delete. Okay, so if you have done some applications before, you would typically understand that you would have dealt with this earlier, but if not, that's fine. So just understand that HTTP protocol use HTTP request methods, and as part of those request methods, so what are these request methods? These are request methods for transmitting client requests to servers. So that's what we were seeing here, right? So whatever the request the client sends to the server, and then the server understands and sends back, that's done through this protocol. And as part of those methods, the most the HTTP requested methods are get, post, put, and delete. So the get request method is used by a client to fetch data from a server. If the requested resource is found on the server, it will then send back to the client. So that's the get request, right? Get request from the client is used by the client to fetch data from the server. So it will fetch the data and then return it back to the client. The put method replaces existing data or creates a new data it does not exist. If you use put many times, it will have no effect. Therefore, it will only be one. There will only be one copy of data set on the server. Okay, so the put request would basically replace any existing data. If not, it create a data if it doesn't exist. But if you use put method multiple times for the same thing, it will have no effect. It will therefore only be one copy of the data set on the server. The post method is mainly used. I mean, again, this is the primarily it's the main thing that's the get and post are used heavily in RESTful APIs. We'll cover that as well. So the post method is used primarily to create a new resource. Using post many times will add data in multiple places on the server. It is recommended to use put to update resources and post to create new resources. Okay, and then finally the delete method will remove data or resources specified by the client on the server. So we have an understanding of what get is, put, post, and delete. Now as part of let's take a quick test to understand whether our understanding is correct. So let's go. A computing device, a smartphone, laptop, etc., that makes a request for some computing resource or data. So what was that? We actually saw over here, right? That's the client. So a client is something like a smartphone or laptop that makes a request to some computing resources or data. So let's go ahead and check. That's client. Correct. So an HTTP method commonly used for creating new resources. So this is nothing but post, right? So as you can see, a post method is used primarily to create new resources. So as of now, I hope you guys have a better understanding of what is going on in the lab. As I mentioned earlier, if some of these concepts, if it's very new to you, make sure to go through the entire lab so that you have an understanding. So since we are running out of time, I'm making sure that we cover the most important points, right? So moving on, we still have a long way to go. So let's say talking about endpoints. So in terms of endpoints, APIs use HTTP methods to interact with data or computing services hosted on a server. These methods are useless if there isn't a way to access specific resources with consistency. APIs utilize communication channels called endpoints so that clients can access the resources they need without complications or irregularity. So these are typically the endpoints. So the first one is, let's say, the following example. So these are some of the examples, right? So you have your own domain where your application is working. So your example.com/store location. So this is an endpoint. This is an endpoint. So these are some of the examples of an endpoint. So there are other endpoints as well. So for example, you might have multiple locations, like for example, store locations / San Francisco. So this is also a valid endpoint. So endpoints are basically like access points where once you call this URL, it would return back with a specific response, right? You can also add query strings to endpoints. So for example, if you want to pass a specific parameter where I say ID is equals to 1, get me resources with where ID is equals to 1 can be one of the endpoints. So the moment this endpoint is called, the API would request that and get you information based on that, right? So those are basically endpoints. So a client sends a request composed of an HTTP method and an endpoint to receive specific data or to perform a particular action on the server. It's important to realize that the server is the one that fulfills a client's request by translating and performing a specific operation based on the method and endpoint provided. Okay, so we've kind of covered endpoints and moving to RESTful APIs. And again, as a developer, you'd have to have a very good understanding of what are RESTful APIs, because most of the APIs that you deal with today in different products and services across multiple companies and organizations, they're all going to be heavily on RESTful APIs. So APIs that utilize HTTP protocol, request methods, and endpoints are referred to as RESTful APIs. So REST is nothing but representational state transfer, is an architectural style that prescribes standards for web-based communication. Okay, so again, you have a Google description of what a RESTful service is. Resources are stored in data store. A client sends a request that the server performs a particular action, such as creating, retrieving, updating, or deleting a resource. And the server performs the action and sends a response, often in the form of representation of the specified resource. Okay, so besides query strings, so for example, whatever we discussed, RESTful APIs can also use the following fields in their request, which is headers and body. Header parameters that detail the HTTP request itself, and body is the data that the client wants to send to a server. So the body is typically written in either JSON or XML, but the preferred industry standard at this point is JSON. So we'll see why JSON in the upcoming sections. So API data formats, JSON. So RESTful APIs use either XML or JSON as file formats, right? So JSON has surpassed XML in RESTful APIs use largely because JSON is lightweight, easier to read, and faster to parse. So some of the examples of what a JSON is this. So this is a key value pair, right? Here are some more key value pairs. And then what you can see is this is also a, so this is like a JSON object, right? So a JSON object that uses curly braces to group data that's arranged in key value pairs. The following is an example of object that contains 3 key value pairs. So either you can provide it in this manner. So this entire thing is called a JSON object. So within the object you have multiple key value pairs. So this is one way how you are passing data from using the APIs, right? If you actually look at an example that we did earlier for our Translate API, we had a curl command calling the Google Translate API, and within the Translate API, our query string were basically like a JSON request, right? We had all the questions um, passed in English, and then the response was again back in the form of JSON response with the translation in Spanish. So that's basically JSON. So that's a JSON request and a response. So when you're dealing with JSON, as a developer, what's always helpful is to make sure that you have some JSON validators to make sure that it works. Your JSON object or string is constructed in the right manner. So again, this is a small example. So imagine you have a lot of data, let's say hundreds of data within your JSON object or array or string, and then you might have a typo here and there. So that can actually cause you headaches. So there are some tools out there. So for example, this one, JSON lint, is an online tool. So what you can do is go ahead and copy one of these, right? And click on validate JSON. You can see that it's a valid JSON. At the same time, if I go ahead and let's say remove a structure, it will say that you can see an error. So immediately you can understand that it's missed out something. So let's go ahead and add that. Check. And I think as part of the code labs, they want you to check this as well. So let's see this in action. So copy paste, validate. So you can see the error, right? So you will see that it has a missing comma and does not maintain proper indentation. So over here you can see that after the first key value pair, they forgot to add a comma. So now that we have added the comma, so 1, 2, 3, validate the JSON. So our JSON is validated. So this is pretty much useful when you have large amounts of data in the form of JSON. You can quickly copy and paste it here and validate it to check whether your structure is in place. Now, answer the following multiple choice questions to reinforce your understanding of concepts. Access points to data or computing resources hosted on a server that take the form of an HTTP URL. So that's gonna be our endpoint. Okay. An architectural style that prescribes standards for web-based communication. That's REST. Right? A file format that is lightweight, easy to read, and fast to parse. We've just handled that. That's JSON. So we have successfully completed this section. So let's go ahead and see. And as you can see, we still come so far halfway, but our score is still zeros. We still need to do some actions over here. So that's where we are getting into the next section. So creating a JSON file in GCP console. You will apply what you have learned by making cloud storage REST JSON API calls in Cloud Shell to create buckets and upload content. So right now you would have a clear understanding of what a Google Cloud Storage bucket is, right? So just like that, let's go ahead and see how to get this done. Open the following link in a new tab. Okay. Let's make sure that it's the right Google account. Yep. So we have the Google Cloud Storage JSON API. Now open up a Cloud Shell session. Run the following command to create and edit a file called valley.json. So what we are gonna do right now is go and click on the Cloud Shell button. And again, as part of all of these exercises, the Cloud Shell has all the command line uh, uh, tools pre-installed. So let's go ahead and copy the first one. So the first one, what they want us to do is go ahead and create a JSON file, right? So nano values.json is basically, it's just gonna create a file, okay, and open that. So we have created a file called values.json, and right now we have opened it. So let's go ahead and see if we have to paste something. So inside the nano text editor, copy and paste the following, replacing your bucket name, okay, with a unique bucket name. So we have done this in the past, so let's go ahead and copy and paste this. So as I mentioned earlier, you can have this as any unique bucket name. So, but as a practice, what I do is just to be unique, I usually copy and paste the project ID. So that's gonna be a unique bucket ID for this example. I paste it. So that's our, so this is a JSON object again with 3 key value pairs. Name is the bucket name, the location is US, and storage class is multi-regional. And you would understand what we're going to do with this. If you remember earlier, we created a bucket in our previous example using the interface, right? We went to navigation menu, cloud storage, and we created a bucket there. So instead of that, let's see how we can do it through APIs, right? So we created a JSON file, so that's done. Once you have it, exit the nano text editor with Control X, Y, and enter. So go ahead. So click on Control X. So you can see over here, Control X. So you want to save this, so click on Y, enter Y, and hit enter. So right now we have created a file called values.json. We pasted in a JSON object with few contents, basically describing our bucket name, region, and so on. So let's go ahead and check if this JSON file is there in our project. Yes. So values.json is there. So the next one, once you have it, let's go and understand what is before before a bucket can be created with the cloud storage REST or JSON APIs, you need to get the proper authentication and authorization policies in place, right? So that's where we are going to do. So understanding authentication and authorization. So what is authentication? So authentication refers to the process of determining a client's identity, and authorization refers to the process of determining what permissions an authenticated client has for a set of resources. So this is a classic example of, let's say you would have interacted with certain applications where it would ask you, like, you want to log in using your Google account, Facebook account, and so on. So that's the authentication part. And once you have authenticated, it would ask, so and so application is requesting to access so and so information. So that's the authorization part, basically providing permissions that needs to be allowed. So authentication identifies who you are, and authorization determines what you can do, right? There are 3 types of authentication or authorization services that Google APIs use. One are the API keys, okay? The second one is service accounts, and the third one is OAuth. So in our previous example, we use service accounts to call the translate API. So an API will use one of these authentication services depending on the resources it requests from where the API is called from. So what are API keys? So let's have a very quick understanding of these 3. API keys are secret tokens that usually come in the form of an encrypted string. API keys are quick to generate and use. Again, all of this can be found in your APIs and services. If you go to credentials, Depending on your application usage, you can either create an API key. So you can see identifies your project using a simple API key to check out and access. A service account key enables server to server app level authentication using robot accounts. And auth client ID requests users consent so your app can access the user's data, right? So typically when we look into like some of those applications where you actually see, even in one of the labs, we actually saw Dialog Flow would like to access your account, right? So that's basically like auth flow. So we have an understanding of what an API keys are. Auth tokens are similar to API keys in their format, but they are more secure and can be linked to user accounts or identities. They are primarily used when APIs are given to a developer, that means to access user data. And service accounts is a special type of Google account that belongs to your application or a VM instance instead of an individual end user. Your application assumes the identity of the service account to call Google API so that the users aren't directly involved. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and try some of these. So authenticate and authorize the Google Cloud Storage JSON or REST API. So we have another 15 minutes left. So let's hope that we continue, quickly finish this. So go ahead and open this on a new tab. So this is the OAuth 2.0 playground. So this is a service that allows you to generate OAuth tokens with ease, right? So scroll down and select the Google Cloud Storage JSON API and then select full control scope. So let's go ahead and do that. So Google Cloud Storage API version 1, right? And then in terms of our scope, we are talking about full control. Click on that. The next step that you need to do is click on Authorize API. So go ahead and click on the account that's created. So let me make sure that I give the right one, ending with 848. Again, let's see it in English. So Google OAuth 2.0 Playground wants to access your Google account, right? Manage your data and permissions in Google Cloud Storage. So I would allow this. So this is kind of an authorization, right? Once that is done, we would see we have an authorization code. We have refresh token, access token. We haven't generated that yet. So click on the blue box that says authorize APIs. Step 2 should now have an authorization code generated. Click on exchange authorization code for tokens. So typically you can see as of this step, it's request and response, right? So let's go ahead as part of the first. So first step was we authorized the APIs. We got the authorization code. Let's go ahead and exchange the authorization code for tokens. Okay, so immediately we got access token and refresh token. So if you go back to step 2, you can actually see you'd find access token and refresh token. So access tokens are then used to further make specific API calls. And let's say if your access token has expiry built in, you would use, once the access token's expiry is done, you would use the refresh token to generate another access token so that you can use the new access token to call all your APIs. So we've done that, copy paste the access token, it will be used in the following step. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy the access token. Simultaneously, you can see how the request and response is. So this is our access token. And in the previous step, you can see that we've used the authorization code for us to generate this response with access token, scope, expires in, and refresh token. So let's copy the access token now. You can either copy it from here or here. So let's do it from here just to be on the safe side. Now create a bucket with cloud storage JSON REST API, right? Return to your Cloud Shell. We've already seen that we have the values.json file. So go ahead and create an environment variable for OAuth2 token. So copy this, go to the Cloud Shell, paste this, and paste your token. So the token that we have got from this step. So go ahead and copy this and paste it over here. So we have set the environment variable. So the next step is to go ahead and set the project ID. So this is easy as well. So your project ID is nothing but this section, or you can also go back to your GCP project, copy this, and paste the same. So we've done with those two steps. Now, after the project ID, let's go ahead and run the command, the curl command calling the API, right? So here, what you can see is it's a post request. We are passing values.json, so that's our value, that's those JSON objects that we had with the bucket name and region and so on. So that's the file that we are passing to this API. And then we are calling the storage API with our project ID. So that's what is actually happening with this specific request. So let's see if this works. So immediately you can see that storage bucket is created. So this is the ID. So we have all of the information, and all of this, even like the location is US, location type is multi-region, storage class multi-regional. So we have successfully kind of created a storage bucket just using APIs, right? We didn't use the interface, because if this is something that you need to have it, you need to get it done directly through the backend, through your backend system or application where you want to create a bucket like this storage bucket, you can actually do this, right, using this API. So this was a demonstration for that. Now let's go ahead and check whether this has actually happened. So go to navigation menu, go to the cloud storage and click on browser. And you can see that a bucket is actually created, right? It's multi-regional state. So all of the details are already done without actually using the interface. So let's check if our progress is done. So far so good. So that takes us to 50. So let's make sure that we complete the remaining quickly, right? So you can use the cloud storage API to upload files to buckets. Save the following image to your computer and name it demoimage.png. Okay. So save image as, let's go ahead and save this to demoimage.png. Done. In the Cloud Shell session, click on the three dotted menu. So let's do the same thing. We've done this in the previous lab as well. Go to your Cloud Shell, click on upload file. Make sure we choose the image, demo image. So that's being uploaded now. And once it is uploaded, we can actually check if the file is transferred to our project, right? So we can see that the file is over here. Now from here, we need to actually store it into our cloud storage. So how we do that is first we get the path. So this is the entire path. So let's get that. Set the file path as environment variable by running the following command. So let's do that. So that's the object. So we are again setting the Google, the environment variable. So the next one is set your bucket name as an environment variable by running the following command. So we've done this as well. So let's go ahead and do that. And the bucket name is always going to be, in our case, the project ID. Paste it. Done. And let's call this command. So here you can see that you're passing the object, which is nothing but the entire path, right? With the demo image.png. You're calling the upload storage command, right, for the cloud storage API. You're providing the bucket name, and then you're saying that the upload type is media and the name is demo image. So let's copy that and see if this works. Yeah, so immediately it's done. So you can go ahead and refresh this bucket and see if you can actually find the file there. So you can see that demo image is now successfully in our bucket. So these are some of the ways how we can use the APIs, right? So we looked into, to kind of summarize this, we kind of looked into um, different set of things from an API standpoint. So let's go ahead and quickly check progress. Yay! We have completed our third lab, and I think it's almost time. So I would like to wrap up this session and with some information. So to kind of summarize, we talked about APIs, what an API is, APIs in GCP. We talked about API libraries, dashboards. We talked about architectures, the protocols and different request methods, what are RESTful APIs, endpoints, and we also talked about how to create like a JSON file, how to use it, and then we talked about authentication and authorization, which is key for API calls. And finally, we used all of that learning and we created like a cloud storage bucket using REST APIs, and then we also uploaded a file using the same API, right? So we have 16 minutes left as part of this lab. So end the lab, rate it, and submit. So now if you actually go back to your page, you would actually find 3 different labs completed successfully, right? So great job so far. I mean, we've successfully completed 3 different labs. And as part of your next goal is once you complete one more lab, and I'll quickly run through this, what it's all about. So this lab is basically, it gives you a high level overview of how to build a Google Assistant application using Dialog Flow, right? And we've already learned how to do that using Dialog Flow. And then instead of just having a simple response directly from Dialog Flow, it will also help you to connect with cloud functions. So using cloud functions, this can be your backend typically where you have some resources that you want to fetch back to the user, or this is the area where you would get the request from the user, process it, and then send back a specific response. So this is an example of how to do that, right? And you would typically find this under in Dialog Flow. On the left hand side, you will click on fulfillment and you would enter the fulfillment API over there. Okay, so this is your fulfillment section. You will enter the URL over there. So this can be using the cloud functions, or Firebase. It can be using Firebase, or it can be using your own application, your own webhook. Okay, so that's basically it. So finally, I would like to move back to our slides. So what's next, right? So some of the important things or resources that you need to do is once you have access to the labs, right? Once you completed your 4 labs, make sure that you go to this link and submit the form, right? So this is a form for you to say that you have completed all the 4 labs, fill in all the information, and this would give you free access to Coursera courses, right? So these are some of the exciting tools and resources that's available for you. So make sure that you actually make use of it. All of these recorded sessions, all the sessions, I mean, this is just one of the the total amount of total sessions that we did as part of the Google Developer Roadshow online 2019. So make sure to go and click this link to check out all the sessions. So we have the sessions in English as well as in Arabic and other languages. So make sure to test it out. And this is a feedback form for the study jam as well as if you want to have a look at the full schedule, it's over here as well. So with that, I think I would like to thank each and everyone for the session today. You guys were great. Thanks a lot for joining in and hope you find these study jams useful. Make full use of it. Make use of the cloud, the Qwiklabs. Make sure that once you complete the labs or quest, provide your public um, profile and you can add the same digital badges to your LinkedIn account. And for people who would like to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter, Medium, and you can also visit my website where I have a lot of tutorials and um, step-by-step tutorials that's done. So for example, here you have how to build your own smart speaker using actions on Google, Google Cloud, and Google Assistant with another board, with a custom board. So you have a step-by-step tutorial on this. If you're interested on how to build self-driving cars, you have this post as well. And if you are users who are already tuned in with Medium, I have a Medium account. So all my blogs and tutorials are over there as well. So make sure to check that out. And if you're really keen and interested on assistant applications, I would highly recommend you to check this one out, which is to create a chatbot using Dialog Flow, and also how to extend that to build it on Google Assistant using actions on Google. Okay. So I hope you guys enjoyed today, and yeah, hopefully see you all in the next one. Thank you. Thank you, and have a great day.